Yeah, he's a. My team. We're going to go ahead and get started. I would like to call this April 1st, 2019 meeting of the Whitefish City Council to order. The first item on our agenda is our Pledge of Allegiance, and I would ask Nick Columbus to please lead us in the pledge this evening. Thank you, Nick. We'll move on to item 3 of our agenda, which is a presentation this evening. We have our annual review and consideration of approval for the Whitefish Convention and Visitors Bureau marketing plan and budget for FY20. And I believe Dylan's here this evening to present the plan and budget to the council. Welcome, Dylan.
Just waiting for my slideshow to show up over here.
Sorry for the technical difficulties, Dylan.
No problem.
Never
We're ready
seems
to
to
go. Good evening, Mayor Molfeld, City Council, and City staff. Thank you for your time this evening. I'm here tonight to present some information on the activities of the Whitefish Convention and Visitors Bureau, also known as Explore Whitefish, and to request that the City Council approve the FY20 marketing plan and public portion of the budget. For your reference, this information can be found on pages 34 to 74 of your packet. State law does require this approval in order for the WCVB to receive funds for the lodging facility use tax, which is also commonly known as the bed tax. And obviously, you can see I have a slideshow presentation I'll be using as a visual aid this evening, talking about the various areas of activities that we engage in, as well as sharing with you some data that is incorporated in the new marketing plan that's in your packet. However, before I begin, I'd like to introduce the members of the Board of Directors, which is a volunteer committee of the City of Whitefish. I'm very fortunate to have such an engaged and passionate group to serve at the pleasure of, and some of them are here this evening. Zach Anderson is the chair, representing Restaurant and Bar. Erica Terrell is our vice chair from Glacier Restaurant Group. She also represents Restaurant and Bar. Rhonda Fitzgerald is our secretary and treasurer from the Garden Wall Inn, and she represents Small Lodging. Nick Columbus from Whitefish Mountain Resort. Mariah Jose from Nelson's Hardware, she's our retail representative. Edna White from Averill Hospitality, and she represents our large lodging. Luke Walworth from Alpine Theater Project is our arts and culture at-large representative, and Jake Cook from Videotech Montana is our at-large technology representative. We're also fortunate to work with two excellent agencies, LJ Communications, which is based here in Whitefish, and that's comprised of Lisa Jones and Brian Schott, and they are our contracted public relations agency. DVA Advertising, which is based in Bend, Oregon, is our contracted creative agency and assumed the duties from Old Town Creative when their contract ended at the end of the last fiscal year. We also have two full-time staff members, including marketing and sales coordinator Dan Hansen, who is also here this evening. And this spring, we're also going to be hiring another part-time staff member. So we're fortunate to have a growing organization and a group of extremely talented individuals and a very experienced group of contracted agencies as well. The purpose of the WCVB marketing plan is to sustainably grow the economy of Whitefish by emphasizing its desirability as a premier year-round travel destination to non-resident visitors who appreciate and respect the character of our special place. We recognize the strain that increased summer visitation places upon our town. As such, the WCVB supports business strategies that emphasize economic and social benefits to our community while maintaining the integrity of place and quality of life of our local residents. This certainly includes the WCVB's core commitment to the Whitefish Sustainable Tourism Management Plan, which we'll be looking for approval later in this meeting to hopefully award an RFP for a consultant to help work with that volunteer committee. And I do serve as one of the principal advisors to that committee. The WCVB also perfectly aligns with the Montana brand. And we'll see if I can move it from over here. Michelle, I might just have you click for me. You can just hit the arrow button. Brand pillar number 1, the Whitefish WCVB does align, like I said, perfectly with the brand pillars. And the 3 Montana brand pillars are as follows. Michelle, you can hit the next slide. More spectacular, unspoiled nature than anywhere else in the lower 48. Vibrant and charming small towns that serve as gateways to our natural wonders. Breathtaking experiences by day. And relaxing hospitality at night. And we do utilize these Montana brand pillars in unison to promote exactly what Whitefish is, which is a charming and vibrant small town that provides breathtaking experiences by day, relaxing hospitality at night, and serves as a gateway to spectacular, unspoiled nature. The WCVB enters into paid advertising, online, print, and out of home in core geographic target markets outside of the state of Montana, identified as having the largest potential for growth. These include Chicago, Los Angeles, Minneapolis, Portland, San Francisco, Seattle, as well as our regional drive-to market, which does include Spokane, Washington. I also want to note that Alberta is an established geographic market, which historically has had strong visitation to whitefish. And although this market is very important from a visitation perspective, we choose not to invest in this market due to fluctuations in the international currency rate that can year in, year out severely affect visitation and spending from Alberta. So as a result, we're cautious to not become overly reliant on one specific market. I also want to note that we spend approximately 50% of our advertising budget promoting winter, 20% for fall, and 30% for spring. We continue to put our efforts into driving visitation whitefish during the shoulder seasons to ensure that we continue to have a vibrant year-round town and not increasing the capacity during the already busy summer months. And just to illustrate one of the reasons for the strategy, here's a sample of lodging occupancy within the city of Whitefish. That's by quarter for 2018. Just notice the very large discrepancy from our summer quarter as opposed to our other quarters, particularly noting that even though July through September this year, we certainly did have some fire impacts in terms of lodging, it's still about half of what it is for January through March. We leverage our advertising dollars with cooperative marketing opportunities, which are provided by the Montana Office of Tourism and Business Development, and we also actively participate in opportunities with our regional partners that include Whitefish Mountain Resort, as well as Glacier Country Regional Tourism. The WCVB continues to also heavily support the work of Glacier Aero by providing inbound marketing support for new and expanded direct air service to Glacier Park International Airport. And for the 5th year in a row, we engaged in a cooperative out-of-home campaign in Chicago with Whitefish Mountain Resort. This included awe-inspiring images of skiing while overlooking Glacier National Park as well as our town. And this was really utilized to raise awareness of a winter vacation to Whitefish with the idea that the winter direct flights from Chicago O'Hare to Glacier Park International Airport provides ease of access to actually make that trip a reality. And what I'm going to show you now is actually a motion billboard that we had in the Chicago Transit Center. You can hit the next slide, Michelle. You can just hit the arrow. It should just go. You can hit the next slide, Michelle. It'll just loop. Thank you. The objective of our secret season is to grow occupancy and business levels in the spring period of May and June. As we continue to position Whitefish as base camp for Glacier National Park, the narrative leads with spring experiences, particularly biking the Go Into the Sun Road. And the digital portion of our spring campaign actually kick off today. So here's a sneak preview. We have multiple different creatives, including a great spring town shot that we utilize heavily from Chuck Haney as well. You'll notice our new campaign here integrates compelling imagery with the invitation for travelers to fully immerse themselves in the Whitefish experience, and we have dubbed this our Wander campaign. The objective of our Summer Plus season, which is our fall season, is to grow occupancy and business levels in the autumn period of September to the end of October. And the narrative for this season includes experiences in Glacier National Park, as well as the public lands that surround Whitefish. The primary call to action in all of our paid placement is to visit our website, explorewhitefish.com. And within the last year, our website has received a consumer-facing refresh, which I'm excited to share with you. And I'll just show you a few screenshots. This is the homepage, top banner here, with the new header image that we just put up there for spring, which also, as you can tell, integrates with our new campaign. And the next slide shows the customizable seasonal rotating itineraries as well as visitor information that we can include up there. This is just below the header image, actually slides horizontally as well. And then at the bottom of the homepage here is a customizable seasonal social media post with the hashtag #ExploreWhitefish. So the idea behind this strategy is to create a homepage which integrates with each of our seasons and our seasonal campaigns as well, in order to have potential visitors actually stay on the site longer and really look at all the great unique businesses and opportunities that they have for a vacation here in Whitefish. As I previously mentioned, we have an outstanding public relations team. In FY18, publicity results reached audiences of over 325 million people, and that was tracked through earned media placement. And that's the last full year of reporting that I do have, so that's why I was using those numbers. For our PR team, they planned and hosted 22 shoulder season media visits in conjunction with local and regional partners, including a Facebook Live video shoot in conjunction with the Montana Office of Tourism, which was on the Go to the Sun Road biking last spring. And that garnered approximately 950,000 views of that Facebook Live video. The PR team also hosted a list of A-list travel writers, which included Mary Ellen Duckett from National Geographic Traveler, Hillary Nangle, who writes for Snow Magazine and Getting on Travel, Jules Older from the San Francisco Chronicle, who also writes for Liftopia and Ever Potter's Travel Report, and digital influencers Rachel Romes and Rocky Mountain Scrambler as well. The PR team tracked 92 publicity hits during that last full year of tracking for FY18. And just some recent earned media results that we had just for this winter that just came out. From the Washington Post, this is called Race Past Busy, Pricey Vale to Catch the Season's End at Affordable, Crowd-Free Whitefish. Powder Magazine video, which I think some of you have seen, is called The Montana Way. That came out this winter. The Local Scene in Whitefish is a skier's paradise from Adventure Sports Network. The Best 33 Trips of 2019 from Outside Magazine. And Explore Montana's Highway 93, Northwest Travel Magazine. That's just a few that I pulled out of our ever-growing list of publicity results from Brian and Lisa. In addition to earned media, the PR team works very diligently on crisis communication, which is a partnership with the city of Whitefish, in order to protect the Whitefish brand as well as the tourism economy of Whitefish. They've also been involved in athlete sponsorship for many years with our hometown Olympic hero Maggie Voisin and coordinate the extremely popular annual Ski with Maggie Day with Whitefish Mountain Resort. In addition to advertising and public relations, we published the official Whitefish Travel Guide and Whitefish Town Map. This year we printed 27,500 of the travel guides, and we're on pace to distribute about 60,000 of the maps. Both pieces are distributed throughout various channels as outlined in the marketing plan, including the 4 kiosks that are located around downtown Whitefish, as well as the 2 new information kiosks that are located in the parking structure. In cooperation with Public Works, we have outfitted the 4 freestanding kiosks with free Wi-Fi, which directs users to a customized landing page on explorewhitefish.com. So this is the actual, when you kind of drill down off the page, kind of do, dine, there's events and things like that. And then this is the actual page that you go to from the public Wi-Fi there at the kiosks. Another component of this project with Public Works was the installation of 2 new webcams in downtown. One that you're looking at is on 3rd and Central. The other is on the corner of Railway and Central facing Depot Park. And these 2 new webcams have boosted our webcam page to the point where on the website it's one of the most visited pages. And just to give you an idea of what it looks like and when we actually have event season, pretty spectacular view from up there. Throughout the marketing plan, you'll notice that we utilize a number of research sources in order to inform our decision making. It also helps us to monitor trends as well, historic in particular, regarding visitation expenditures, etc. Although not a complete list, here's some of the major resources that we pull from, and in particular, one set of data that you'll notice in the FY20 marketing plan that we have now for the first time is we have entered into what's called a Visa View joint venture with the Montana Office of Tourism and Business Development, and that now provides us with a better understanding of visitor expenditures within Whitefish. And I included some of that information in the marketing plan, and that's on page 43 in your packet, just for further reference on that. So just a quick outline of the budget. When you look at our public budget of $150,000, I just wanted to give you an idea of percentage-wise where that goes. So 72% of that is for consumer advertising, so that's our direct media spend. 72% of the public budget goes specifically to that. 28% is to marketing support. Another way to look at this, just so you all can see, obviously the entire budget, both public and private, is in the marketing plan for reference, but just to give you an idea of overall kind of percentages, when you combine our public and private funds here, about 50% of our budget is spent on consumer, 31% on marketing support. Our PR estimated spend is about 18%, and then groups marketing is about 1.6%. So to summarize, we know that what we're doing is working. Our targeted online ads consistently outperform the industry standard, and our earned media coverage through our PR team continues to grow, and most importantly, translates into real business in Whitefish, as well as through positive and negative travel and tourism trends, which do happen both domestically and internationally. We will continue to be creative and innovate with our tourism marketing and our PR efforts in order to bring high-yield, low-impact geo-travelers to Whitefish. When projecting our annual budget, we do take into consideration historical trends from the many sources that I had up on the screen a minute ago. Those do include the Whitefish Resort Tax, our bed tax collections in Whitefish, as well as the tourism promotion assessment collections, which is the 1% that is part of our private funds, as well as we do get a preliminary projection from the Montana Department of Commerce for our public budget. So that's really what we base that number off of as well when we're just talking for the public budget piece. So once again, I'm here to request that the City Council approve the WCVB FY20 marketing plan and the public lodging tax budget of $150,000. And I would be happy to answer any questions that you have.
Thanks very much, Dylan. Are there any questions for Dylan on the annual budget, or Richard?
Just a couple of points that I noticed. That one is there's reference to skiing and snowboarding, but I see no reference to hockey. And when I run through the parking lot at the Ice Den, I see an awful lot of Canadian license plates, and I know they don't come down just for the day. So it seems to me that is something that I just don't see addressed in your marketing and in your reporting. And so I just wondered if that's something that you are looking forward to considering.
That's a good question. I mean, that's certainly a discussion at the board level. One thing we can say just from a strategic point of view is that the vast majority of our markets, which are the fly-in markets, not the drive-to, not the Canadian drive-to markets, they're really coming for that winter experience, particularly alpine skiing. With that said, Richard, you know, there are a lot of other activities that folks do on the ground, and research does show us that when people do come to ski, not every single one of their days is spent skiing the entire day. So we certainly do promote other activities, in particular Nordic skiing, snowshoeing, some dog sledding as well. But hockey is not one that we've looked into from an event perspective.
Yeah, it just seems to me that if people are coming for a tournament, then maybe they'll ski or do something else.
Sure.
So, that's one. The other is I would encourage you to continue to look for green opportunities to promote the greening of Whitefish, if you will, ways that we can cut down our carbon footprint and make Whitefish a greener place, and then be able to use that as not as a greenwash, but certainly as a bona fide greening of our community to meet our goals.
Excellent. Understood, and I think we'll certainly address that in the Whitefish Sustainable Tourism Management Plan, which I'm really excited to get going on. So,
okay.
Yep.
Those are the only couple of comments that I had. Thanks.
Thanks, Richard. Further questions for Dylan or comments on the marketing plan or budget? Quick question, Dylan. I know that the CVB's been looking at lodging occupancy trends for quite some time now. Can you touch briefly on how those trends are changing based on the breakdown of those three different seasons? Like, are we seeing increases in the shoulder seasons, and are we holding steady in the summer months, or can you touch on that briefly?
Sure. Yeah, I'd be happy to. We definitely are seeing growth in our shoulder seasons. I've had that lodging occupancy, the hard data, for about 3 years now. Okay. So year over year, we are definitely seeing growth in occupancy within the shoulder seasons. What we are seeing is the occupancy levels are growing. However, due to the increased supply of both brick and mortar rooms as well as vacation rental, what's happening is that visitors are being spread out more, and so that's driving the average daily rate down. And so that's really the trends we're seeing, is occupancy has been going up in the shoulder seasons, but the rate is going significantly down. And obviously, it's really interesting when you look at that too to see what sort of impacts, particularly that fire can have. 2 years ago, particularly in September, which is one of our biggest months for growth in the shoulder season that we've seen historically, due to the large fire in Glacier National Park, we certainly saw a hit there, but we rebounded significantly both last September and this September. So, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, that question, I was actually going to segue into that very question about the effect brick and mortar as well as short-term rentals are having on those percentages, and I think it's something we need to track very closely, and I know you are. But anyway, I'll leave it at that. Any further questions for Dylan? We do need a motion to approve the WCVB FY20 marketing plan and public portion of their annual budget. Ryan.
I would move to approve the WCVB marketing plan and public portion of the budget.
Is there a second to the motion? I'll second. I saw Rhonda getting nervous back there. No, I almost said April Fools. We do have a motion on the table. That motion has been seconded. Any further discussion? All those in favor, please. Richard?
Yeah, and I just hope that the next time around, a year from now, those two things that I brought up will be at least be addressed.
Absolutely.
All those in favor of the motion, please raise your hand, and those opposed, like sign, and that motion does carry unanimously. Dylan, thanks very much.
Thank you all for your time.
Appreciate it. We'll move on to item 4 of our agenda, which is communications from the public. This is time set aside for the public to comment on items that are on the agenda but not advertised as a public hearing. So if you are here to speak on our 2 public hearings this evening, please hold your comments until I call those specific hearings. Otherwise, any comments or communications for the council, just approach the podium and your name and address, please, ma'am.
I haven't done this for a long time. Just talk into it. I'm loud enough. I don't even need this thing, probably. All right. Hi, guys. My name's Judy Pettinato. I'm old Whitefish. My grandfather. I've been around for a long time. Currently, my husband and I live in a house built in 1957. And our next door neighbor, Brett Rathel, I think is how you say his name, I just know him as Brett, is trying to get a variance tonight. And, I was really upset that I did not hear about it. So I did do a couple of things. One, I talked to Bailey today. He did tell me that he has permission from Dr. Schlott to go across his property, gigantic boulders that they're planning. I would just protect the lake. He did not, however, get permission. And she maintained that the road that they will take from Parkway Drive. So I would say, for one thing, you and it is my personal opinion, I would not trust this guy. He doubled the size of his dock without a permit. It's very difficult to fight that kind of private marina. A lot of friends from Canada. I'm assuming I do not appreciate that at all. I went through all the hoops for my dog, followed the rules and did as I was told. Dock without getting a permit. So I'm really unhappy about that. I wouldn't trust him. I know that he's going to bring in these big 4x6 or 6x geologist is trying this. This is going to stop that embankment from falling. Whitefish Lake, the high water line is right next to the bank. I mean, it's right there. You can see every spring the water goes right up to the bank. Where he doesn't work. Then, of course, he's going to want to do, wall. And our idea to use boulders because it's not gravel and dirt and rock. But, you know, and I really understand. So I guess that's a decision that you guys have. The other problem I have is that he is wanting to put a gravel beach down in front of his house. And of course, I know from personal seeing it happen that Glenn Brown, who was a gravel man, put gravel on that beach. That beach has been gravel. Only allowed for the life of a property on Whitefish Lake, gravel the beach once. Because there was no issue to Glenn Brown, now we're going to have it graveled again. That's a little hard. So those are my concerns. I wish that I'd have been told. I guess that you guys do not tell people. I guess or give somebody a phone call. Or I would have really appreciated though if I had. However, I am retired. So thank you very much for listening to me tonight.
Thanks very much, Judy. Thanks for coming. Further public comment tonight? Chris.
Chris Schustrom, 504 Spokane Avenue. I'm wearing my Whitefish Decorations committee hat. I just basically wanted to thank the city and Craig specifically for helping us put up and take down the decorations, and the police department for providing a little bit of traffic control to make sure all the volunteers are safe when we're doing that. It was another great winter with the decorations looking really good, and the all-volunteer effort continues to be a success. We're going to be working on reupholstering bells this summer, next fall, as well as adding some new light strings around Depot Park with the completion of the Depot Park improvements. And then jumping over to my Heart of Whitefish Downtown Flower co-coordinator hat, we're going to be taking the downtown baskets to the nursery this week to have them planted. And it's a great partnership with Maria and the Parks Department where we split the cost of the downtown baskets, and so they should be ready to go probably by the first week of June. So Whitefish will keep looking great, so thanks.
Thanks for all you do, Chris. Yep. Further public comment tonight? Not seeing any. I'll go ahead and close communications from the public. Are there any volunteer board reports before we hear from Michelle regarding our Whitefish Sustainable Tourism Management Plan Phase 1 update? Any volunteer board reports? Michelle?
Good afternoon. Did you have something? You want to go? No? Okay. So on the agenda, you'll see the Sustainable Management, the Tourism Management Committee is requesting to award a consulting contract for Phase 1. The history of it is on April 17th, 2017, the council met in a work session with the CVB to discuss development of a Whitefish Tourism Master Plan. In January of 2018, the City Council established the Whitefish Tourism Master Plan Committee and then later named it the Sustainable Tourism Management Plan Steering Committee. And in May of 2018, we held an open house where 40 community members participated, and an online survey was available, and it resulted in 675 collected surveys. The city provided notice to request proposals from qualified consultants to develop a sustainable tourism management plan in March of 2019. The RFP was based on Phase 1 to create the plan by June 2019 and Phase 2 implementation of the plan by fall of 2019. The city received 4 proposals, and after some discussion, the committee recommended appointing Applied Communications and the Hingston Roach Group to Phase 1 of the proposal. The committee decided not to award Phase 2, which is the implementation, until more understanding of what the plan will entail in Phase 1. The fiscal year 19 budget provides for a total of $50,000, which is $25,000 from the city and $25,000 from CVB, as a matching fund between the city and the CVB to hire a consultant and formalize the Whitefish Tourism Management Plan. The anticipated budget for Phase 1 is not to exceed $35,000. The city contributing $25,000 and the CVB contributing $10,000. Implementation of Phase 2 will be funded with the remaining $15,000 from the CVB. The Whitefish Sustainable Tourism Management Steering Committee respectfully recommends the City Council award the consulting contract for Phase 1 of the Sustainable Tourism Management Plan to Applied Communications and the Hingston Roach Group in an amount not to exceed $35,000. And I can answer any questions that you might have.
Staff report or request? Not seeing any, we will need a motion. Katie.
I don't know. Oh, there we go. Hello. I will move to approve a contract for the Whitefish Sustainable Tourism Management Plan for Phase 1 for an amount not to exceed $35,000 to Applied Communication and the Hingston Roach Group.
Is there a second to the motion? Seconded by Melissa. Further discussion? All those in favor, please raise your hand, and those opposed, like sign, and that motion carries unanimously as well, Michelle. Now we'll turn to the council. Any volunteer board reports from the council?
Yes.
I know there's Bike Ped.
Yes, there is Bike Ped, being the first Monday of the month. There's no movement currently on the BNSF easements. We have several that are in negotiations, but no movement yet. But the communications continue. Secondly, the Baker Underpass is still our #1 priority, and we're waiting on the State Alternative Transportation Grant. That will help move that along with some other approvals. The Riverbend Condo Trail section, the EA went to the FWP. FWP suggested some revisions. That's back to Fish, Wildlife, and Parks, and also awaiting on the Corps of Engineers sign-off. The Duck Inn easement is in the owner's hands. That's already been staked, and I think that that'll be signed off on very soon. And the wayfinding signs are at the printer. So that's movement on the trail, just in time for spring.
Further board reports from the council? Not seeing any. We will move on to item 6, which is our consent agenda. Any changes or additions to the March 18th, 2019 meeting minutes, or can I have a motion for approval, please? Andy.
I would move to approve the consent agenda as presented.
Is there a second to the motion?
Second.
Seconded by Councilor Hildner. Further discussion? All those in favor, please raise your hand. Those opposed, like sign. Richard, are you voting for or against the consent agenda? Okay, and that passes unanimously. Michelle?
Sorry.
I didn't see your hand.
I didn't raise my hand. I was busy working on the
I just didn't see it. We'll move on to item 7, which are 2 public hearings this evening, and we'll start with item 7A, which will be ordinance 19-7, an ordinance of the City of Whitefish, Montana, rezoning approximately 22 acres of land comprised of 16 parcels and a private access road located in Section 1, Township 30 North, Range 22 West in Flathead County, Montana, from County R3, which is the one-family residential district, to Whitefish WLR, which is our one-family limited residential district, and adopting findings with respect to such rezone on a first reading. Bailey.
Hi. Okay, so due to our technical difficulties, I gave Michelle my PowerPoint, so she'll be running that for a second. There's just 2 slides. So the first slide here that you guys are seeing, I just did a Google map kind of overview of the area, just so you guys know kind of where we're looking at up there. So this request, it was originally scheduled on the January 17th Planning Board meeting, proposing a zone change from the county R3 to the city WR1. But at that meeting, there were a number of affected property owners that came that stated they would prefer the city to rezone the properties to WLR instead of WR1. Since that request would be considered downzoning the property, we had to have every affected property owner sign a waiver of protest, including the HOA for the road, Park Knoll Road, saying that they agree to waive their rights to protest to go through to WLR instead of WR1. So we got all those agreements, were submitted on February 10th of 2019, and so that's why it's taken so long to get from the annexation to tonight. So we are proposing to change the 16 parcels in the private road from the county R3, which is their one-family residential, to our WLR, which is our one-family limited residential. The parcels are located along the west side of Highway 93 South, north of JP Road, and south of Pheasant Run. The purpose of rezoning them is due to adoption of Resolution 1845, which annexed the property into Whitefish city limits on December 3rd of 2018. Since they're now within the city limits, we have to rezone them from a county zone to a city designation. So on page 98 of your packet, there's a comparison between the WLR, the proposed zoning, and the existing county zoning. The biggest change is the minimum lot size is definitely bigger. The WR1 that we have would be more consistent with the lot size of the R3, but the WLR is the 15,000. The subject properties total approximately 22 acres in size combined. Majority of them are developed with residential structures. The growth policy identifies this area as suburban residential on our future land use map, and the districts that apply to that suburban residential designation is our WCR, WER, and WSR zones. They're surrounded by a mixture of different uses and different zoning. There's the City of Whitefish shop to the north, that's Zone WI. The south is vacant and is a mixture of City WCR and County Seg 5. The east is residential as well as vacant, which is a mixture of WLR and County R3. And then the west is the church that's accessed off of Caro Avenue, and that's Zone WA. So we did mail the notice to the adjacent landowners within 150 feet of the parcels on March 1st. We noticed advisory agencies on February 25th. We put a legal in the paper on February 27th, and I've had no comments since the staff report or up to this evening on the revised project, I would say. So just hitting the highlights of the criteria for rezoning. As I said, the growth policy land use map does designate the parcels as suburban residential, which is actually WCR, WER, and WSR. The proposed change to the WLR is not consistent with that designation. However, prior to the termination of the interlocal agreement, or the donut, as some people refer to it, those parcels were zoned WLR, so we're just going back to what they were zoned prior to that termination. And that's actually moving the parcels, going down is moving the parcels more towards conformance with the growth policy rather than to the WR1. The properties are served by City of Whitefish Fire and Police. Future developments would have to meet city requirements for roadway width and fire department standards. Public services and utilities are available along Park Knoll Lane and Highway 93 South, which is adjacent to the properties. City water has been extended to the neighborhood from the north. However, the homes in the area are served by individual septic systems. The area is included in our city extension of services plan, and services potentially would be extended in the future as future development occurs, or if any of the existing systems fail and they can't get a new septic system. City water is extended to the properties and the area adjacent to the state maintained highway, which is a paved highway, as everybody knows. School district would not change to the recent annexation. The proposed zoning designation does include setbacks, maximum building height, and lot coverage. And again, all future construction will require conformance with the building code and approval of a building permit. The character of the district is predominantly single-family residential. The lot sizes are comparable, and the zoning would be the most equivalent. As I said, they are currently, the majority of them are developed with single-family homes. The WLR does only permit single-family dwellings. Therefore, the value of the surrounding buildings should not be negatively impacted by the proposed zone change. And I've already gone over that. So, staff recommended approval of the rezone. The Whitefish Planning Board met on March 19th and considered the request. There was one member of the public that spoke at the hearing in favor of changing it to the WLR, and those draft minutes I did include in your packet. And then following the public hearing, the Planning Board did recommend approval unanimously to adopt the staff report as findings of fact, and I'm happy to answer questions for you.
Bailey on her staff report. Any questions? Not seeing any, Bailey. Thanks very much. We did advertise for a public hearing on what will be Ordinance 19-7. Is there any public testimony this evening? Sir.
Mark Volker. I live at 128 Park Knoll Lane and Vice President of the Park Knoll Homeowners Association, as well as speaking for myself and my wife, Kathleen Grant. Bailey's correct in everything she said. Most, if not all of us, at one time bought our properties at the WLR. Throughout the donut fiasco, as I call it, we were changed to the next closest when we went to the county, which was a lesser one, and then or a more liberal zoning, I guess. And then, of course, going back to the city, it's well, the next closest one is more liberal yet, and so it didn't make sense. So all the members of our community asked and did sign a waiver of protest for the WLR, and we would like to be in the WLR because that's what we originally were. I want to thank the planning board, planning staff, Angela and Bailey for helping us along with all this and honoring our request to try and get that done. Thank you very much for your consideration.
Thanks, Mark. Appreciate your comments. Further public testimony tonight on this item? Not seeing any, I'll close the public hearing and turn it back to the council for hopefully a motion. Andy.
I would move to approve WZC 18-10, adopt findings of fact, staff report as recommended to us by our Whitefish Planning Board on March 19, 2019.
Is there a second? Seconded by Ryan. Further discussion on the motion? All those in favor, please raise your hand, and those opposed, like sign, and that carries unanimously, Michelle. We'll move on to item 7B. You have in your packet a consideration of a request from Henry Roberts of Half Full LLC for a conditional use permit to construct a professional office building that exceeds 4,000 square feet in gross floor area, located at 643 Denver Street, which is a property zone WB1, which is our limited business district. Bailey.
Okay, so the applicant is requesting approval of a conditional use permit to develop a professional office building at 643 Denver. A CUP is required as the proposed building would be greater than the 4,000 square feet in gross area threshold. And since it's gross area, we're counting both floors. That's where that came up. They're proposing a two-story structure, which would be approximately 8,500 square feet in gross floor area. So it's not for the professional office. It's just because it's bigger than what we would allow outright. The applicant, they're proposing 35 parking spaces for the building that would be split between two parking lots in the front of the building and the rear of the building. And then vehicle access to the property is from Denver Street. So the property is approximately 0.92 acres, or around 40,000 square feet in size. It is currently vacant. It is zone WB1, which is our limited business district. It is surrounded by residential uses on the north, south, and east, which are zone WR3, and then commercial to the west, which is the WB1, and that's the Bonsai and their parking lot for reference. The growth policy designation on the property is actually split between the neighborhood commercial and the high-density residential, and that was due to a boundary line adjustment that was completed in 2014. The neighborhood commercial designation is on the west side of the property, and the high-density residential is located on the east side of the property. And on page 30 of my packet, there's a picture of the property and then where that designation is split between the two, just for your reference. They would be connected to city utilities and services. We mailed a notice to the adjacent landowners within 150 feet of the parcel on March 1st. We noticed advisory agencies on February 25th. We placed a legal in the paper on February 27th. When I wrote the staff report, I had received one comment that was in support of the proposal, but with concerns of pedestrian safety along Denver Street, and that was included in the planning board packet and then also in your packet as well. I've received no additional comments after that one comment. So the review criteria for a conditional use permit, as I said, the growth policy on this property is split between the neighborhood commercial and the high density residential. The property, as I said, was split due to a boundary line adjustment in 2014 that just moved the property in line. But the growth policy designation didn't change. The current WB1 zoning is consistent with the portion that is shown as neighborhood commercial. The current zoning is not consistent with the high-density residential, but I would like to note that professional offices are listed as conditional uses within those zones, or in the zones associated with that designation, which are WR3 and WR4 along with Wisconsin Avenue. The Wisconsin Corridor Plan that was approved in 2018 did identify the subject property within its corridor plan boundary, specifically in the sub-area A district. However, it did not propose any changes or issues that were identified as part of that plan for the property. As I said, the underlying zoning is WB1, and the proposed use for a professional office is a permitted use, but we're just looking at the size of the gross floor area for the conditional use permit. The proposed use is consistent with the purpose and intent of the underlying zoning. The WB1 does require a 20-foot front setback along Denver Street and a 20-foot setback along the eastern and southern rear property lines, since these abut residential zones, but there's no setback requirement along the western side, which again is the side that's bordering Bonsai, since that's a commercially zoned property. They are proposing 35 parking spaces on their submitted site plan. This parking standards and our regulations require 1 space per 400 square feet of gross floor area. So with that 8,500 square feet, they would be required to provide 21 parking spaces. So they're actually exceeding the parking requirement by 14 parking spaces on the property. There is not a maximum building lot coverage within the WB1 either. All access requirements are being met with Denver Street to the north property line. They are proposing a private driveway that would be 20 feet in width with a fire hammerhead turnaround installed at the end, utilizing that rear parking lot. They will be required to have a full sprinkler system as required by the fire marshal, and he will also review their engineering and building plans to ensure all emergency standards are being met. This area of town is well known for having high groundwater, so groundwater monitoring is being included as a proposed condition of approval, mainly since those results can impact their stormwater management detention system, but there are no other environmental constraints that are known at this time. So as I mentioned, the parking will be divided between 2 parking lots, one in front of the proposed building and one at the rear. They are meeting, as I said, the required number of parking spaces and the parking layout standards as well. The front parking lot is shown at only 15 feet from the front property line, but since in our zoning regulations, specifically in our parking standards, we do not allow parking to be permitted within the front yard setback for commercial, or should say anything other than single family or duplex. So as there's a 20-foot setback, that needs to be moved 5 feet, and the applicant is aware of that already. So, but that I do have that as a proposed condition. Open space is not a requirement for the conditional use permit, and as I said, there's no lot coverage in the WB1 zoning. Since the properties to the east and south are zoned residential, they are required to do a landscape buffer under our zoning regulations that equals the same width as the required side and rear setback of 20 feet. And this buffer must achieve a 50% visual screening within 3 years of planting. So we are requiring a landscape plan that be submitted with their building permit application. Additionally, since the proposed use is commercial, they are required to provide landscaping in compliance with our chapter, and that does include a tree preservation or retention plan. The parking lot does also require a percentage of landscaped area, so the landscaping plan will include that as well. We have not seen any proposed signage, but any new signage would be required to get a sign permit through our office. So they would be connecting to city sewer and water that is available along Denver Street. The amount of impervious area for the proposed building, driveway, and the parking lot is well over the 5,000 square foot threshold. So they are required to submit an engineered stormwater plan for approval by the Public Works Department. And again, that requirement for the groundwater monitoring is to help that plan and make sure that whatever they're proposing is adequate for the site. No frontage improvements are being required along Denver Street since it is located on our reconstruction priority list. However, we are proposing a condition of approval that the applicant be required to install a sidewalk along the Denver Street frontage. And this would allow the connection between the sidewalk that was conditioned for the adjacent subdivision that just came through not that long, maybe a month ago now. That was a requirement by council that they actually install that sidewalk instead of doing cash in lieu. So we are recommending a condition that the applicant continue that sidewalk towards Wisconsin, and that would further help the connectivity between Colorado Avenue, the bike path along that side, and then Wisconsin Avenue as well. Just a note, so Denver Street should be able to handle any additional traffic from the proposed use as it's situated between Wisconsin and Colorado. Using a general professional office trip generation number, we estimated the project could generate around 100 trips per day based on the gross square footage of the building, and that's less than our 200 trip threshold for a traffic impact study. Hours of operation, they're proposing would be normal office hours during the weekdays. Neighborhood community compatibility, their proposal is to construct a 2-story professional office building. It would be under the 35 feet maximum building height. They are proposing it to be constructed towards the middle of the property. I estimated around 140 feet from Denver Street. That will help reduce the mass and scale of the building, as well as it will be reviewed by the Architectural Review Committee, which do also look at the mass and scale of the building, as well as the neighborhood compatibility. And the Architectural Review Committee could recommend changes on the overall look and the mass and scale of the building as well. The existing neighborhood is a mixture of commercial uses along Wisconsin Avenue and then some residential as you move further back towards Colorado. They are a mixture of single-family and multifamily buildings ranging from duplex to larger apartment buildings. So this professional office, it can provide a transitional area between some of those more populated commercial uses and the surrounding residential. It will look, since it's a 2-story building, it will look more similar in height to a lot of those residential uses as well. And then with their proposed hours of operation being normal workday hours from 8 a.m. to 5 p.m., it will allow the use of the building to occur when the majority of people would be working as well. And so therefore, there's more parking for bonsai as well. So staff is recommending approval of the conditional use permit. I recommended it with 15 conditions. The planning board met on March 19th and considered the request. There were no members of the public other than the applicant that spoke at the meeting, and I did include those draft minutes for you. Following the public hearing, the planning board did recommend approval unanimously, but they added 3 proposed conditions to it, and those are that the applicant submit a tree retention plan prior to beginning construction activities. They must provide dedicated bicycle parking and storage on site, and then that they install appropriate striping and no parking signage along the emergency access and the fire hammerhead turnaround. And I guess the only one thing I told Richard at Planning Board, I would talk to Travis about that last one about the striping. He was actually on vacation for spring break, as everybody else was. So I didn't get a chance to talk to him, but I did talk to Craig, and that is, Travis does review the engineering plans as part of his sign-off for those. So it is likely that he would already be looking at that, just for reference as well, for keeping that on or not. So. But I'm happy to answer questions, and the applicant is here as well, and they can definitely help answer as well.
Thanks, Bailey. Any questions for Bailey on her report? Not seeing any. The applicant is here. Henry, welcome. Just name and address for the record, please.
Hello, I am Henry Roberts. I live at 1105 5th Street, and I've been there since, well, I've been in Whitefish since the mid-90s. And I just wanted to give a little background, because again, it says Half Full LLC on the application, and that's our holding company, but the business that will be in the facility is the Zane Ray Group, which is, we've been in business, if you're familiar with us, we've been in business since '99. I've been in Whitefish since 2004, I think. We currently have 26 full-time employees, and we work primarily in the outdoor industry. So we do websites for the outdoor industry. So we work for some pretty large companies. Work for Skull Candy, the headphones, Osprey Packs, Orvis, Fly Fishing, Patagonia, Carhartt, the brands that we work for. We do design and e-commerce development in those sites. So currently we're downtown. We're in Railway District, occupying a space that it's commercial on the first floor, but it's residential on the second floor, and we've expanded into the whole building. So we've got nowhere to grow at this point. It's also a very inefficient space. So we have 6 bathrooms and 3 kitchens, and really the layout doesn't work at all for an office space at all. So it's a lot more than, for the square footage, we should be able to put a lot more people into it, basically. So that's why we got interested in this project, was we wanted to have room to grow. We wanted to do a more professional, more office-focused building that we could occupy, and found this space, and we've been just working through the process, but working our way up to this part of the process. As far as the requirements, there's been talk about adding a sidewalk. We have no problem with that. We actually began the water study already, because that's since we found out about that requirement, and have no problem with bike parking, tree retention, or striping and marking no parking on the roundabouts. So as far as everything's been great going through our process so far, I would definitely love to thank your time and thank everyone else at the city that's helped us out. And if I'm here for any more questions. We also have our civil engineer and our landscape architect here as well. So.
Great. Thanks, Henry. Appreciate the report. We did advertise for a public hearing on this request for a conditional use permit. Are there any public comments this evening? Any public testimony on this item? We'll go ahead and close the public hearing and turn it back to the council for discussion or a motion. Ryan.
I would move to approve WCUP 19-02, the findings of fact in the staff report, and the 18 conditions of approval as recommended by the Whitefish Planning Board on March 19th, 2019.
Is there a second to the motion? Seconded by Councilor Hartman. Further discussion on the motion? I think this is going to be a great addition to that side of Whitefish. Henry, as you know, Henry actually does our website. We're certainly no Patagonia, but they do a phenomenal job. So your business is very much welcomed as far as I'm concerned. I think it's going to be a great economic driver for that side of town. So thanks for staying in Whitefish. It's important. All those in favor of the motion, please raise your hand. And those opposed, like sign. And that motion carries unanimously. Thanks. It's all Bailey.
It's all me. I'm like, this is my one night. It means I don't have to come next week, see? I'd rather just dump it all on one.
We don't either.
Oh, not next week. 2 weeks. 2 weeks. Sorry.
We'll move on to item 8A, which is a consideration of approval of an application from Brett Warthall for a Whitefish Lake and Lakeshore variance located at 430 Parkway Drive for replacement of large boulders and standard permit for stone stairs and a gravel application. Bailey.
Okay, so this property is located at 430 Parkway Drive. The applicant, they are requesting multiple activities within the lake and lakeshore protection zone. And again, I posted, this is just, I don't know, I can't really see it on the map. Good to know for next time. I tried to get just a Google imagery of where we are located. So Glenwood Drive is down here to the south that comes in, and then the lodge would be further up to the north. So that's Parkway Drive. It's kind of hidden back there. And then, Michelle, if you go to the next one, that's the actual site plan, kind of zoomed in a little bit better. So they are requesting, as I said, multiple activities within the lake and lakeshore protection area. The first one I'll talk about is the standard lakeshore construction permit, which is to replace some wood landing and stairs with some stone landing and stairs, and then a one-time gravel placement on their existing gravel beach. And then the second request is the minor variance to install large boulders, which would be over our maximum size permitted. And then they would be doing some additional plantings to help stabilize the existing bank. So for the standard permit, typically you see these under the consent agenda generally. So they are proposing to replace, there's 2 sets of landings or stairs, landings and or stairs that would be replaced. The eastern set is approximately 2 stone steps and a 15 square foot landing. And then the western set is about 4 stairs, and that's 11.5 square foot landing. The stone stairs would be a maximum of 4 feet wide, which is our standard, and then the remaining portion of the wooden stairs would not be altered. So it's just the landing and those lower ones that connect into the high water when high water's up. The second part of the standard permit was the proposal for the placement of 11.5 cubic yards of gravel to the existing gravel beach. Based on my research, I was not able to find another permit for the gravel beach placement, and our records go back to about to 75 when the regulations were put into place. So based on what I can find, this would be the first application that they would be asking for, and the gravel is within the allowable amount based off the linear footage of the property. And then as part of the project, they're going to, as I said, revegetate the property with some natural plantings and native plantings. So just as a note, the existing constructed area for the dock, there's also a portion of the deck that's within the lakeshore protection zone, and then the stairs is around 842 square feet. Since the stone stairs would be replacing the exact same amount of constructed area, there would be no change in the total constructed area of the property. I hear. Talking too fast. So for the minor variance, they are proposing to stabilize the current bank with some strategic placement of large boulders. The current bank at the site is very steep. It's over 6 feet in height. I think, Johnny, when we talked at the Lakeshore Committee, there's some places that are close to 11 feet in height between where the high water, natural grade, and then the top of the bank. And it is active and very quickly starting to erode. They're requesting a variance to 3 sections of the regulations to create the project with the greatest minimal disturbance to the lakeshore. The variance would be to place the riprap to follow the contour of the existing shoreline, and then the slope requirement that the riprap would be limited to 18 inches in vertical height, and that the stone used for it is basically proposing to exceed our maximum, which is 18 inches in diameter. And I just want to note, we don't really have, other than this riprap section, we don't really have a section for just putting boulders in. So that was the best section that I could use in our regulation to look at this type of a project. So in reviewing a minor variance, we have 4 criteria that must be met in order to grant approval. One is that due to unusual circumstances, strict enforcement of the regulation results in a hardship. So as I said, the existing bank, it is very steep, well over 6 feet in height. It's starting to erode at the base near the water level where it's connecting with the toe, and that's accelerating the erosion process. The house that's existing is within 10 feet from the top of the slope, and that's actually the deck. And I wish the picture was better. Yeah, so it's within 10 feet of the top of the slope. In some areas, it's directly adjacent to the top of the slope. So in order to comply with the regulations, the applicant would have to create or complete a major resloping project along almost the entire lakeshore property. Other options would include installing a retaining wall along the shoreline. However, the lakeshore regulations, I would like to point out, that show that retaining walls are supposed to be a last option, kind of the last-ditch effort, and only when riprap or other projects have failed or are inadequate for that. So they're proposing to maintain the existing slope with the placement of these strategically larger boulders along the shoreline. So as I said, there was two alternatives, but both of them have the potential to cause more impact to the lakeshore than what they're currently proposing. That would be placement of riprap, which would require a large amount of excavation to the slope in order to comply with the regulations, or then the second alternative is the placement of retaining wall. And since, as I said, it's over 6 feet in height, that would be a very large wall and also require riprap in front of it. So again, you're adding even more rock to the lakeshore protection zone as well. And both alternatives would drastically alter the characteristics of the shoreline at this location. The proposed variance would not materially diminish water quality, diminish fish or wildlife habitat, create a public nuisance or safety hazard. As I said, it might alter the characteristics of the shoreline, but this would be the least impactful instead of cutting the bank back and doing some major resloping. And they are specifically requesting this design to help maintain the existing shoreline and minimize any potential visual impacts that the property may be viewed from the lake or the surrounding property owners. And then general benefits from the variance would include minimizing the potential for further erosion and lake sedimentation, providing a more stable lakeshore, and then visual impacts as well from that. So staff does feel that the applicant meets the criteria for approval of the variance request. So we did recommend approval to the Lakeshore Protection Committee with 24 proposed conditions of approval. The Lakeshore Committee met on March 19th to consider the request. The applicant was present at the committee and did answer questions as well. No other members of the public were at the meeting. We did include the draft minutes for your as part of your packet as well. And then following staff presentation, the Lakeshore Committee voted to recommend approval of the application on a 3-1 vote. And I'm happy to answer questions, and then Johnny from White Cloud Design is the consultant, and he's here as well if you guys have questions.
Bailey, any questions for Bailey on her staff report? Richard.
I'll come back to that after I hear the applicant or their, because there are a couple questions that I have that I want to have addressed, please.
Perfect.
Question, Bailey.
Yep.
I think I was on the Lakeshore Committee when we approved the Bay Point project, which included the placement of large boulders due to wave action. Have we approved similar requests such as this besides the Bay Point project?
I've only know of one, and that was over off of West Lakeshore Drive, and it was maybe a year ago, I feel like, but it was only for about 4 of them. It wasn't very much, and that property was a little different. They had seemed like groundwater springs coming out, or something was seeping out of the ground, and it was starting to erode some of their bank, and so they just wanted a couple to put there, and they did ask for a minor variance as well. So that's when Johnny came to me with this project. That's where I told him, I was like, well, this is kind of the only section we have for this type of project, and that's what we did for the other one, so I kind of had them go down the same path as well. So
Great. Thanks, Bailey. Johnny, anything to add? Just name and address for the record, if you don't mind.
John McDonald, 150 Railway Street. I own White Cloud Design. Any questions you might have regarding this project?
Any questions for Johnny? John, oh, go ahead, Richard.
Sure. Did you go back? It was mentioned that in the 1960s, gravel was placed on this property on the shoreline. How far back did you go when you looked at gravel applications?
Yeah, all we could do is go as far as what the city records were, so Bailey helped us with that.
Okay. That's that question for now. Thanks.
Johnny, can you, Michelle, if you don't mind navigating to this page, can you go to the main site plan and just walk us through it briefly, and in particular, the boulder and riprap placement and the purpose of the boulders?
Yeah, exactly, and we worked with Bailey, and thank you, Bailey, for assistance with what our options would be, and we presented these to the client, our client as well, of the riprap. Because of the slope is in some areas, it probably averages about 8.5 feet of vertical height, and about 11 to 12 feet of horizontal. So it's very steep, and there's not a lot of options other than building. John, you know this very well. If you start to build a retaining wall on that sort of slope, you're going to need a 7-foot tall retaining wall to do it. So we looked at that and said that's not what anyone wants to see from the lake, or doesn't meet any of the regulations. So we feel that this placement of these large, oversized dry stack boulders in a random form that looks natural would do the best job at the erosion problem they're having with the least visual impact. At the same time, as Bailey mentioned, the two staircases, the landings and this lower sets of stairs actually are in the high water. And so you see like a water stain on that wood. And so that's basically deteriorating over time. And so by proposing to remove those and replace them in a stone product, a dry set stone product, it's going to help the longevity of that system and help stabilize the bank that they're dealing with, and also not allow any leaching into the lake and further erosion into the lake.
So the boulders will be intermixed with just angular riprap, is that correct?
No, the idea is just to use large, oversized.
So no riprap?
No riprap.
Okay, I misread that.
And it's a really unique, I've never seen a hillside erode kind of the way this is with our last couple of years of really high lake levels. It's kind of eroding the toe of it,
Yeah.
but just in some areas. And some areas are just fine, and the native vegetation is kind of doing its job.
And those areas will be preserved?
Correct.
Yep.
Yeah, and that's what was kind of a challenge to graphically represent what we're trying to do here, because it's very site-specific. And the idea is to address the areas that are eroding, and you can tell may erode, with the large boulders. Areas that the native vegetation is doing its job, we'd leave it alone and let it stay. In addition to that, when we're done with placing the boulders, any exposed soil above and or around the large boulders, we'll plant with native ground covers and shrubs to let those root systems take off and do their job.
So if I'm interpreting your site plan and then these site photos correctly, the toe of this slope is literally at the high water mark? So he has or the applicant has a fairly sizable manicured lawn in the lakeshore zone?
Yeah, it's an existing, I guess you can call it a lawn. It's certainly not like plush.
Right, right.
It's pretty rugged, but it's just, I guess.
Is it maintained? Is it
that,
mowed?
I'm not sure if he mows it or not.
Fertilizer applied? Are you?
No, I don't think, definitely not fertilizer.
I know you can't, that's why I'm asking.
And I didn't ask if he mowed it or not. We didn't get into that because that's not part of the application.
Sure. I was just curious more
Yeah.
than anything. It's pretty rare to see this site condition with
Right.
a lawn below high water. I mean, there's a few areas around the lake, but not many.
Right, yeah. And you guys are all familiar with that part of the bay. It's just, it's low, kind of lowland area. So really for them, it's more protecting their bank, their deck structures, and, you know, God forbid, their home structure eventually. And doing it in the least visual impact way possible, and protecting the lake quality as well.
Okay. Richard, question?
Yeah. I'm always concerned when structures are placed at the edge of water, whether it be a stream or a lake, what that might do, what's the potential impact outside of the site. In this case, either up the lake or down the lake for the neighbors. In other words, you fix your problem, but then you send that problem to your neighbors. What's the potential here?
That's a good question, Richard. I personally don't see any, because I think if anything, it's high water and a little bit of wave action that's happening there. So I don't think it's really going to push water or waves to an adjacent property. I think that wave action is coming from the lake itself and going back out.
Okay.
Andy?
As I look at this, and I like the concept of breaking it up as much as possible and trying to allow the natural vegetation that's there now, stabilize those portions of the bank. My concern would be, because I live on the lake and I have a bank that's pretty similar to this, although it's about double the height. My concern with what might happen here by doing this, all of those open areas, water's going to want to work in there, and then it's going to want to work behind everything that you were going to be putting in to stabilize it. And I'd be very concerned that you're going to continue to rot that out as that water goes in, and we see a future application to make it a solid bunch of rocks all the way down there. I mean, I'd like to think the vegetation will do it, but I don't know. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it sure
I
does,
mean,
yeah.
because I just know how water works, and it's
Right.
going to get into those areas, and then it's going to get behind those rocks, and it's going to rot that toe out continually, and they're not going to be super tightly stacked, and then that material's going to work its way out, and you're still going to get some failure in that bank. That's my personal opinion from living in the same spot on a steep bank for 30 years. But
Yeah, thanks, Andy. And I think that that's something that we work through on our design solutions. And we kind of started with a solid wall, if you will, placing these boulders butt end all the way across. And the owner really didn't want that visually. And we said, well, you know, your next best option would be this more staggered effect. And you could have that effect of some erosion. And they kind of hinted towards, well, let's just do this and let the native plants be the buffer for those gaps in the rock.
I hope it works, because I think it's a great idea, and I do have some concerns. And I guess I just have one other comment, and it kind of relates to Judy's comments about gravel. And I think one of the things we did have a workshop earlier, about a month and a half ago, and a lot of the work that's been done down on Flathead Lake now is starting to show that what we really need to do on these beaches is we need to build back the gravel beaches, and ultimately those gravel beaches are what save us from having to come and put big boulders in to stabilize the banks. And we saw numerous applications that they'd worked on down on Flathead Lake, and they've had tremendous success with that. So more an editorial note, I think when we start to look at lakeshore regulations again, it's something we certainly want to take a look at, because quite frankly, I was pretty impressed with what they've done down on Flathead, in places that are getting beat up a lot harder than any shores do on our lakes. So I don't know that gravel's the big boogeyman that we once thought it was. Now maybe it's really something we need. So anyway, that's just a quick note.
Yeah, thanks for that. And Bailey made us aware of that working session and kind of what came of it. And I think that's a great idea. It makes sense in these large kind of almost breakwaters, using the gravel as that kind of breakwater, which is a completely different direction, obviously, especially on a property like this.
Did you have a question, Richard?
It'll be for Bailey.
One last question, Johnny, on your steps and boulder cross-section detail, page 188 of the packet, Michelle, of the PDF packet, I should say. You have the cross-section coming down the existing subgrade with the stairs drawn, and then you call out the sand, the 3/4 inch crushed, the 1.5 inch crushed, and then the landscape filter fabric. And this kind of gets to Andy's point. Will that schematic be a consistent treatment the entire length of that slope, or
Right.
just where the stairs are located?
Yeah, great question. That intensive, if you will, of a buildup would be proposed under the staircase landings, because we're building up there to replace the existing stairs that have free space underneath. Under the boulders themselves, we're proposing just to put a 6-inch layer of compacted 1.5-inch gravel to kind of bed and seat those big boulders into, so they're kind of keyed in, and it gives them a little bit of stability instead of just setting them right in that native clay, essentially, where they would have more potential to move.
Thanks.
Yep.
Any additional questions for Johnny? We'll call you back up if we have any.
Okay.
Thanks, Johnny.
Thank
Appreciate
you.
it. Richard.
Bailey, is the current dock compliant?
I don't know for sure. So the last permit that I have on file is from 2005, and that was the dock permit. So we haven't done anything out there since then. So I don't go look at everybody's dock every single year. So for all I know, it might be in compliance or not in compliance, and that's what I explained to Judy. But we are complaint-based enforcement, so that's part of it as well. But I don't know. I mean, it wasn't part of this application or on the plans. It's not in right now, so I don't know for sure.
Yeah, I guess, well, I'll wait till there's a discussion.
So variance requests, you don't do a site review?
Well, we do, but there's no docs in right now.
That's right, good point.
So I mean, I don't know what configuration they're going to put it in this year, so.
Okay,
Yeah.
fair enough. Katie?
Right. I would move to approve the application from Brett Rathall for a Whitefish Lake and Lakeshore variance located at 430 Parkway Drive for placement of large boulders and standard permit for stone stairs and gravel application, WLV 19-W1.
Is there a second to the motion? Second. Seconded by Councillor Hartman. Katie, would you like to speak to your motion at all?
I can speak to it a little bit, and I think it's going to just kind of open up the floor for discussion, because I think that's where it's going. We have a lot of people up on council who know the Lake Shore Protection Committee much better than I do, but listening to the public comment today, I believe that this is the best possible option that we've been given, and that I would like to see attempted at this site to try and prevent erosion and to protect the lake as we see it now.
Thanks, Katie. Richard?
Yeah, I think that the replacement of the stairs is a really good idea. I really like to see that. I think that the continued erosion certainly doesn't do anything for the water quality in the lake. However, I am concerned, as was mentioned during public comment at the very beginning of the meeting, that the existing dock may not be compliant, and I would be reluctant to approve of a permit when I know that there is, or when it's suspected, or there may be a portion of the property that is already non-compliant or may be non-compliant. And until I have some assurance that there is, in fact, full compliance with existing lakeshore regulations, I couldn't vote for it.
Okay. Andy?
Condition number 25, and that condition 25 would be this permit would be, and variance would be valid only if the existing dock is in compliance with existing lakeshore regulations.
I will second that, and that's okay with my motion, original motion.
Okay, there's a friendly amendment which will be adding condition number 25, requiring the permit only be valid if the existing dock is in conformance with or in compliance with existing lakeshore regulations. There was a second by Councillor Williams. We'll vote on this friendly amendment first before the original motion. Further discussion on the amendment? All those in favor, please raise your hand. Those opposed, like sign, and that friendly amendment passes, which will be condition number 25, which brings us back to the original motion. Is there further discussion? Andy?
Yeah, I agree with Richard that further erosion of the bank is probably going to do more harm to the lake than the boulders will. And we do have, when our lakeshore regulations originally came into being, they are concerned an awful lot with aesthetics, as John well knows, having sat on that. And a lot of it's to maintain the natural appearance of the lakeshore. Well, we built a lot of houses around the lake, and a lot of those got built at a time when we didn't really pay too much attention to where they got built, and now we've seen those banks continue to erode over time, and quite frankly, I think we do need to take a look and find ways for people to protect their homes from falling in the lake, because there's some of them out there. If he's within 10 feet of the top of that bank right now, I mean, in 30 years from now, that bank's going to be underneath his house. That would be my guess. And so I think we have to be cognizant of that, and I guess the reason I'm willing to vote for this is I do like the approach that John's come up with, that it's going to be as visually non-impactful as possible, and I think we're going to have to find those ways. And well, like I said, I'm not that much in favor of it. I also live right down the street from Glenwood, and I look at a big concrete wall that got built down there years ago because they take a beating on that point from all of the northwest winds. And so I think this is the best option that we've got, and I think they're going to hopefully do a good job at making it not a problem for anyone going by on the lake going, oh, look what they did, that's ugly. So anyway, that's my thought.
Thanks, Andy. Further comments or discussion? All those in favor of the motion as amended, please raise your hand. And those against, like sign. And that carries unanimously. Michelle. Thanks, Johnny. We'll move on to item 8B, which is a consideration of a request from Mark Panacidi of Alta Views to accept cash in lieu for 10 affordable housing units. And before we turn this over to Dave, I just wanted to acknowledge we do have Ben Davis in the audience representing the Whitefish Housing Authority, and he provided us a letter which is enclosed in your packet for consideration. Dave.
There was a development approved originally called The Views, or also changed to Deer Creek, for 168 condo units. And as part of that PUD approval, the developer agreed to provide 10 affordable housing units as part of their original 168 condos that they were going to build. That was not for a density bonus. I'm not exactly sure why they offered that up, but that was part of their approval. So when the Alta Views project came in to amend that particular PUD, and change that development into townhomes, at least the ones around the exterior from the condo units that were built there. They had to abide by the conditions of approval of the original PUD. And so with that original PUD, there was 10 affordable units. The original agreement that was approved as part of the preliminary plat 1706 on February 20, 2018 by the City Council had a condition that he would build those affordable units and then deed restrict those to the Whitefish Housing Authority. Since that time, the Housing Authority, in discussions with the developer, decided they'd rather have cash in lieu. They weren't quite ready to provide them qualified applicants, and at the end of the day, I think that the cash in lieu was a better option for both parties. On March 11th, Mr. Panacidi submitted a letter proposing to pay a cash in lieu fee of $45,000 per unit for each of the 10 units. We talked about that particular cash in lieu. And typically, cash in lieu is based on a formula, and at the time that original project was approved in 2005, the cash in lieu at that time was set at $3,000 per unit for the total units in the development. And since there's 166 units being proposed, that cash in lieu amount would be $3,000 per unit, or $498,000. And so staff's recommending that cash in lieu amount be for $498,000 for the 10 units. Mr. Panacidi is out of town. He's not able to be here, nor any of his representatives. But he wanted us to proceed anyway, even though he couldn't really comment on this. But there is a letter from him in your packet, as well as a letter from the Housing Authority, and also Ben Davis from the Housing Authority is here to answer any questions about the specifics of that. And Angie and Adam may know more about some of the negotiations that went on with regards to the cash in lieu.
Adam, anything to add? Thanks, Dave.
I think the only thing that I would add is I did have a conversation with Mark today, and I even offered to bump this a meeting, and he said, no, go ahead and go through it. But he did have some concerns with increasing above the $450,000 that he had submitted as an offer. I did talk to him a little bit about how we arrived at where we were at, how this should be a whole lot more, given what we're looking at going through inclusionary zoning. But by having the nexus with the $3,000 per unit being built from back when this was approved, that was a great nexus. He does not like the idea of paying an extra $48,000, but he said to get back with him, and he would consider whatever the council agrees to.
Okay. Thanks, Adam. Thoughts, questions? Katie?
I was gonna make a motion.
Go ahead.
I would move to approve the cash in lieu amount of $498,000 for the 10 affordable housing units for Alta Views.
Is there a second to the motion? Seconded by Councillor Hennan.
I'd like to
Katie.
speak to it if possible. I know that we are pushing affordable housing units. We need to build our stock. Looking at the numbers and how it pencils out and speaking to Ben's letter that's in the packet, I think that this is the better move for us in terms of being able to create a better product for affordable housing instead of having units at a higher price rate that we can't really fill or actually probably even want in the Whitefish Housing Authority's stock. And in terms of being able to negotiate with the developer, I don't want to open that can of worms. We need to set our formulas and stick with them. And if this was what was developed in 2005, then we need to stick to that number. And what comes forward with inclusionary zoning, we need to stick to that number. That way we're not just in the habit of negotiating back and forth with developers. So that's my thought.
Thanks, Katie. In follow-up to Katie's comment, Michelle, can we make sure that the minutes reflect the unique situation we're dealing with here, and the fact that the cash in lieu, was set via ordinance 05-16 when the original PUD came back through, and at that time it was a $3,000 cash in lieu payment. Just want to be pretty clear on the record with that, so future developers don't make similar requests. As Katie mentioned, they need to follow our new IZ ordinance if and when that goes into effect, which we hope is soon. Is there any further discussion? Adam?
I forgot, I had one more thing as well. So,
Sure.
Granted, this doesn't fall under inclusionary zoning, but one of the things we're going to require under inclusionary zoning is that when all of the submittals are in at final plat, that they would have to pay all their fees in lieu, if there be any, or anything that goes along with it. Final plat has already been done and approved in this case, and I know that Panacidi, when he was first thinking about offering a fee in lieu, is he would like to pay half of it this year and half of it next year. Just wondering if maybe the timing of the payment could be part of the council consideration.
Good point. Katie?
I would be willing to amend that and say that it can be paid in phases. When we look at a lot of, as Adam said, when we look at a lot of our affordable housing agreements in terms of how they're building out, it comes in different phases. And so if we would want to work out with the fee structure with the developer in terms of how he's building out, I would be okay with that. I'm not sure how that would work into the language. I would say we'd accept cash in lieu for the 10 affordable housing units for the total amount of $498,000 to be paid by a date no later than, what would that be, in your opinion?
I would say half by July, and then maybe the other half by next July.
Half by July 2019, with final payment due by July 2020.
Let's frame that up as a formal condition, and then we'll vote on that condition before the original motion. If you don't mind.
Perfect, yes. A condition of approval will be that the developer of Alta Views will pay half of the $498,000 by July 2019, and the remaining portion by July 2020.
Is there a second to that friendly condition? Seconded by Councillor Hennan, which brings us back to the original motion. Are there any additional comments? All those in favor, please, Richard?
Settled on that price of $498,000, is that correct?
That was the motion.
Okay.
And that's the request and recommendation from the city staff.
Didn't want to leave any money out.
All those in favor, please raise your hand. Those opposed, like sign, and that motion carries unanimously. Thanks for coming, Ben. We'll move on to item 9, communications from our city manager. You have Adam's report enclosed with the packet. Any questions for Adam? Adam, anything additional to report on?
Nothing really additional, but I do want to make another public plea for our attending our open house and State of the City address, which will be in 2 weeks from tonight, right here. It'll be a great opportunity to meet with council members, department directors, and kind of get to know what each of the departments do, and then that'll take from about 5 to 6 p.m. At 6 p.m., we'll all convene into this room, and we will have, the mayor and I will deliver a 40-minute State of the City address, followed by Q&A, and that'll roll right into our meeting at 7:10. So I just want to invite those at home, those listening, and hopefully Heidi will put another plug in the paper and try to get as many people out as we can. I think it'll be a good thing we'll be doing for the community.
Absolutely. Thanks, Adam. Adam, I had a question on your manager's report. What type of feedback are you getting from folks at your coffee with the city manager meetings? Are they well attended? Or are there common themes that you're hearing, concerns that?
There are not common themes.
Okay.
And I range from, something as simple as, city hall type things to cemetery type things to we need to stop all airline flights, period.
Okay.
So there's a pretty good range of things that I hear and come my way. I think one of the big things I hear is everyone that comes says they very much appreciate that I do this, that I hold these. There have been times where one person shows up,
Yep.
and there have been times where 10 people show up. I'm going to say the average is probably 3 to 4, which is pretty much a comfortable number to sit around the table. But I think it's going well. It doesn't take a ton of my time, but I think, there are people that know that I do it, and and they like that. And I've had people tell me, yeah, I'm going to stop down there sometime, But for the most part, it's just a low-key thing where we kind of get to know one another. We shoot the breeze about what's going on in the community. And for the most part, I think it's been really well received.
Great. Thanks for the update. Any other items to report on, Adam?
Nope. That's all I've got, Mayor.
All right, thanks. We'll start with Richard tonight. Any closing comments?
Yes, I do. With regards to the goal setting, there are 3 things that I think are worthy, or I hope others will find worthy of discussion or inclusion. I think we really need to explore and be proactive towards recycling and do what we can and make sure that we are encouraging not only recycling but encouraging some businesses to move in that direction. So I think recycling is consistent with our energy policies, and so I would like to see us have some emphasis on taking whatever steps we can towards recycling. That's number 1. Number 2, I don't want to lose sight of the work that we've been doing on Lion Mountain, trying to get Lion Mountain on board, and the septic leachate problem. I think that's probably just an ongoing goal. It doesn't have a conclusion date, at least not yet. And third, it's something that has been discussed. We've seen some preliminary drawings, but I would like to see a more formal master plan for the wastewater treatment site, that entire area. We've talked about having that plan with the use of some recreational facilities and things that we might potentially do on site. So I'd like to see a master plan for the wastewater treatment plant site.
Okay. Are those formal requests for us to consider now?
Yes.
Okay, because I believe recycling was on our 2019 goal list, and it was subsequently removed, if I'm not mistaken, because of how the market switched.
But I think that if we take it off, we won't be able to get ahead of a market change, and
Sure.
I'm hopeful that there's going to be a market change, and I'd like to see us take leadership there.
Okay, showing of hands if you'd like to add recycling to the goals list under a longer-term category. And that's unanimous. How about, I would phrase it more as sewering and septic leachate
Sure.
as a long-term goal. Is there support to add that to our goals list as a long-term objective? Seeing head nods and hands going up. And then finally, I know we did discuss the master plan. I know Craig's working on that for the wastewater treatment plant. Is that something that we need to identify, Craig, in your opinion, as a goal, or Adam?
That is identified as a goal for the FY19, and it will be complete by the end of the year, which is why it's not showing up on the FY20 plan.
Great. Progress. Thanks, Richard. Andy, any comments tonight? Ryan?
I'm not sure if anyone besides Angie or myself knows that it is currently Law Week at the University of Montana School of Law, and this Friday at 9 a.m. they have an oral argument set. It's a very interesting case out of Kalispell. It's called City of Kalispell v. Salzgiver, and Mr. Salzgiver was charged with partner or family member assault, and he was ordered by the judge to personally appear at every hearing, or his right to a jury trial would be waived. So subsequently, he failed to appear, and the judge waived his right to a jury trial over defense counsel's objection. And the issue here is that the Montana Constitution provides that cases can be tried without a jury if someone fails to appear. However, the Sixth Amendment to the United States Constitution carries no such provision. So that's the issue before the court. I think it's going to be a fascinating oral argument, and you can stream it live on MCAT, the Missoula Community Access Television Station, again, starting at 9 a.m. on Friday morning. So I would encourage anyone who has an interest in constitutional law or criminal procedure or criminal law to check it out.
And that's being argued by the Supreme Court.
Yep, it's an attorney that was with my office, but he's no longer with us, and then someone from the Montana Attorney General's office.
Interesting.
Yep.
Great. Thanks, Ryan. Katie? Thanks, Katie. Melissa? Just a couple quick things. More out of curiosity, Dave or Craig, I know the quarry wasn't required to secure a final plat because it was a PUD, correct? Or CUP.
Conditional use.
Conditional use permit, so no final plat was required. Why? How can that project be going vertical without the infrastructure in? I thought it's always a requirement that the public infrastructure, the streets, curbs, gutters, stormwater, needs to be built before a project can go vertical, or am I off base?
Projects do have the option to bond for certain improvements in order to obtain building permits, and we do have a bond in place for the quarry for all of the unfinished, not only public infrastructure, but all of the private road, curb, gutter, and other infrastructure that winds through that subdivision. The majority of that project will be private roads.
Right.
It's just the extension of Marina Crest that'll be public, but we do have a pretty significant bond in place for that project.
Great. Thanks for educating me on that. I don't think I had anything further. Is there anything further from staff? Have we provided the direction everyone needs to move forward? Good to go? Therefore, we are adjourned. Thanks.